Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Deja Vu here, and I am bringing you the third game from Top Dog SKT1 versus Woongjin Stars, and we just got to see Hyuk absolutely obliterate Quanro in a ZVZ. Wasn't even close. His 9-pool Speedling build destroying the 12 hatch from Quanro, and Quanro not even really putting up much of a fight in his counterattack, absolutely falling apart. Quanro looking terrible in his debut for Woongjin Stars. Hyuk looking very, very good, and SKT1 has to be very happy with that. For the first game for their always criticized Zerg line. But this is a player for SKT1. This is a lineup for SKT1 that is never criticized. The Terran, and this is going to be their new #1 Terran fantasy, and by new I mean like from last season. Since last season, like all of last season, Fantasy's been their #1. They got rid of, or I don't know if I should say got rid of, but Cute Angel or Frozian left. Actually, it's Frozian. Okay, I might be wrong. I thought Frozian was SKT1. He might actually be like Samsung Khan or something. But yeah, he left as well. I think he was on SKT1's roster. I always forget those things. But yeah, he's gone. So it's going to be Fantasy and Free. Free for Woongjin Stars has been their ace for several seasons. And he's finally gotten some solid backup this last season from Zero, who really came on towards the end. Zero looking very, very good here. This game's going to be on match point. It's going to be Fantasy in the bottom left in yellow, and Free is going to be, I believe I saw him in the top right, I believe. We'll see it in just a second. Yeah, in the top right in blue, maybe green. Okay, so he's going to be in green. Match point, let's see. Just looking at the map, it's got some... Ooh, this is a very, very interesting map. It's got some very long, to me it looks like it has some very, very long distances in terms of ground travel to the other person's base. It almost looks a little Blue Storm-esque because of the distance, because it's a very, very winding path that you have to take to get to your opponent's base, but it's also it's not very far if you go by, dropship play. I think could be very, very important here, along with tank play, because there's a lot of sunken pits, that tank lines could do a lot of damage, and I don't know about, I'm going to assume that the distances are correct, but from the sunken pits, I think you might actually be able to tank the natural expansion of your opponent. I'm going to assume that you can't do that, because if you could, that would just be just terrible map making and kind of ridiculously biased towards Terrans, and I've got to think that that's going to be something that had to be thought out, and I pray that distance is exactly what it takes for tanks not to be able to shoot into the Protoss probe line, because if you can hit that probe line with Terran tanks from the low ground area, that is just absolutely not fair. And Fantasy here is throwing a forward Rax. I didn't get to see whether or not a supply depot went down first. I gotta assume that he's not going to be doing an Uber Cheese on Free. He is a quality player, Fantasy is, and I don't expect him to do that kind of like a BBS cheese. That would be very, very out of character for well, I shouldn't say out of character for Fantasy. Fantasy has had some good cheeses in the past, but at the same time, I don't think he really needs to. And I kind of want to see a good game, a high quality, maybe longer term game between these two players. It does look like Free actually went for a 12 next, so we saw Bisu go for a 12 next in the first game against a Terran opponent, and now we're seeing Free go for a 12 next against a Terran opponent. Granted, of course, Fantasy is a superior player to Piano, but nonetheless, we are seeing similar strategies from both Protoss players here on new maps against their Terran opponents. And Free not moving north, not going to see that forward Rax, but he's going to move south right into Fantasy's base, and he's going to know that there is a forward rack somewhere, either because he's going to come down and he's going to see the refinery, and there's the factory, so he knows that a Rax has been produced, likely in a forward. Well, actually, he hasn't wandered into Fantasy's base. He has not wandered into Fantasy's. Okay, there we go. Finally, Free wandering around Fantasy's base, going to see that there's no barracks really, so he's got to assume that there's a forward Rax around or a floated Rax, and he's probably going to hopefully produce a Zealot or two to defend here, and I hope he's also got a Cybernetic Core going very, very early. And this is very similar between what we saw from Piano, and yeah, we do see that the SCV is being pulled off the line, so this is almost an exact copy, exact replica of what we saw in set 1, only instead of Bisu being the Protoss and Piano being the Terran player, we're going to have Fantasy as the Terran player and Free as the Protoss. Now we will get to see whether or not Free has it in him, and you will see whether or not Free is able to hold this off, what the difference is between a player of Free's capacity, who's very, very good, and a player of Bisu's capacity, who is absolutely incredible. And we're seeing Free here choosing to bring probes off the line, already losing one here, or maybe that was an SCV that went down, bringing probes off the line to try and deal with these Marines, and struggling to do so, not able to do too much damage. They're losing another probe here, and he's losing a couple probes here, and that bunker still looks like he's going to get up. No Zealots have been produced. This is the difference between a Bisu and a Free. Bisu was able to hold off those the Zealots, was able to hold off the Marines and SCVs for a much longer period of time, did not lose any probes even though he lost his 12 Nexus. And on the other hand, Free is going to do pretty much nothing. Already lost something like 5 probes, doesn't have any Dragoons out yet, hasn't been able to use that Zealot effectively at all. And here comes the Vulture for Fantasy. Of course, this is great execution by Fantasy. Fantasy obviously is, like I said, Fantasy is the superior player to Piano. But you have to wonder what would happen if Bisu was here defending rather than Piano, or rather than Free. How will Bisu